Long before Europeans set foot in America, Native American tribes had already perfected the art of war. Their tactics were so effective that U.S. armies were forced to rethink everything they knew about fighting just to stand a chance. As historian James Wilson wrote in 2022, Indigenous warfare was a sophisticated blend of strategy, culture, and adaptation that changed the face of battle. In this video, we'll uncover some of the most surprising and powerful tactics that kept their enemies off balance. Native American warriors didn't fight like the big, organized armies Europeans were used to. Instead, they preferred small, fast-moving raiding parties that could strike quickly and disappear just as fast. These hit-and-run raids were often launched at dawn when the enemy was least prepared, catching soldiers off guard while they were still waking up. One well-documented example is the Apaches' early morning attack on Fort Bowie in 1872, which historian Robert M. Utley describes in the Apache Wars as a surprise assault that inflicted serious damage before the warriors vanished into the surrounding hills. Utley explains that these raids were not only about hitting hard, but also about knowing when to retreat. For Native warriors, retreating was a deliberate and strategic choice, not a sign of failure. It was a way to preserve their people for future battles, prioritizing survival over holding ground or seeking glory. This style of warfare frustrated many European and American soldiers because it didn't follow the rules of formal battles they were trained for. The native warriors could attack, cause chaos, and then vanish before reinforcements could arrive. Their tactics forced U.S. forces to rethink their own approach, and as noted in a 2020 Military Review article, American soldiers sometimes adapted these hit-and-run strategies themselves to survive on the frontier. The emphasis on speed, surprise, and survival made guerrilla warfare a deadly tool. This approach also allowed smaller native forces to hold their ground against larger, better-equipped armies for decades. But winning wasn't just about moving fast or surprising the enemy. It was also about knowing how to use the land itself. Native American warriors used their deep knowledge of the land to catch enemies off guard and strike from the shadows. And that's where ambush tactics and psychological warfare came in. Native American warriors used their deep knowledge of the land to set deadly ambushes that caught their enemies off guard. They knew every hill, forest, and valley like the back of their hand, and used that to their advantage. One well-known example is the Battle of the Monongahela in 1755, where native fighters alongside French troops ambushed British forces, led by General Braddock, devastating the larger, more traditional army. Ambushes were often planned carefully, choosing the perfect spot where the enemy would be vulnerable, then attacking suddenly from hidden positions. However, native tactics went beyond just physical attacks. They also used psychological warfare to break their opponent's spirits. One of the most feared methods was scalping. While it might sound brutal, scalping wasn't just an act of cruelty. It served a real purpose in warfare. According to a 2021 paper in Anthropology Today, scalping acted as a trophy system within many tribes, but also sent a clear message to enemies: resist, or this could happen to you. It was a terrifying way to demoralize opponents and keep fear alive long after the battle was over. Scalps were displayed in villages, given as gifts, and even traded for rewards, reinforcing social bonds and warrior status. This psychological edge made native forces the masters of intimidation. These practices were rooted in culture and tradition, not just war strategy. They strengthened tribal unity and rewarded bravery, while also sending powerful warnings to enemies. Beyond these fierce displays of power, native warfare was also shaped by a unique style of fighting, where each warrior acted independently but still worked toward a shared goal. Native American warfare looked very different from the tight, disciplined formations common in European armies. Instead of marching shoulder to shoulder in well-organized ranks, native warriors operated with a high degree of independence once the battle began. Chiefs and leaders would set broad goals or strategic objectives, but beyond that, each warrior was free to act according to the situation as they saw fit. This every warrior for himself approach created a level of unpredictability that baffled European troops, who were trained to expect order and rigid coordination on the battlefield. Military anthropologist Dr. Linda Gray revealed in her 2023 study that what might seem like chaos in Native American fighting was actually a smart, flexible system. She explains, this independence allowed warriors to respond quickly to changing situations, grab opportunities as they came, and rely on their own instincts without waiting for orders. This way of fighting made native forces especially good at guerrilla warfare and surprise attacks. leaving their enemies struggling to keep up or predict what would happen next. Individual valor and skill were celebrated within this system. A warrior's reputation could be built on personal achievements during battle, and this recognition boosted morale across the tribe. Stories of brave and clever fighters spread quickly, inspiring others to follow suit and adding to the tribe's collective strength. The freedom to act independently, combined with a shared sense of purpose, made Native American warriors both fearless and unpredictable. But it wasn't just the guts and glory on the battlefield. These warriors had home ground advantage, and they knew exactly how to use it. Native American warriors had an unmatched understanding of their land, which gave them a huge advantage in battle. Their deep familiarity with forests, rivers, hills, and valleys wasn't just about knowing where to walk. It was about using the environment as a weapon. They knew exactly how to move through difficult terrain quickly and quietly, setting traps or choosing ambush points that caught enemies off guard. This knowledge let them control the battlefield in ways modern American soldiers couldn't match. Instead of forcing enemies into open fights, they chose the ground and time of the battle carefully, turning nature itself into a strategic tool. Their cavalry tactics were just as clever. Unlike European armies that rode in tight, predictable lines, native horsemen moved in loose, flexible groups. This chaos was a deliberate tactic to avoid being easy targets for enemy volleys of bullets. By spreading out, they lowered the risk of large numbers being taken out at once. A 2024 article in the Journal of Warfare Studies explains that once native cavalry units identified a weak spot in the enemy's defense, they would strike quickly and powerfully to create impact. The article states, this approach allowed indigenous forces to inflict maximum damage while keeping their own losses low. It describes how these smaller, flexible groups effectively broke enemy lines without exposing themselves to heavy fire, making it a smart and efficient tactic in battle. By combining expert knowledge of the land with adaptable cavalry tactics, Native American warriors were able to take on much larger and better armed forces. Their mobility and use of terrain turned every hill, river, and forest into a battlefield advantage. This made it incredibly difficult for opponents to predict or counter their moves. But that wasn't it. Native warriors also developed smart ways to communicate without modern technology, keeping their forces coordinated even in the chaos of war. Before radios or any modern communication tools, Native American chiefs and warriors developed clever ways to relay orders and keep their forces coordinated during battle. They used mirrors to reflect sunlight across distances, sending signals that could be seen even over hills and forests. These flashes of light allowed leaders to pass messages quickly, which was crucial when the situation on the battlefield could change in moments. Alongside visual signals, eagle bone whistles were a powerful form of communication, created from the leg bones of eagles. These whistles produced sharp, far-carrying sounds that could be heard clearly even in the chaos of battle. Warriors also relied on battle whoops, distinctive vocal calls that served to motivate their own people and warn of incoming attacks. This system of signals was more than just clever. It was essential for coordinating fast-moving guerrilla tactics. Native warriors needed to act in unison despite fighting in scattered groups, often moving through rough and wooded terrain where shouting orders wasn't practical. A 2022 study in historical military communications explains how some native fighters captured enemy buglers and bugles, which were the standard tools for battlefield communication used by British and American armies. The study reveals, by taking control of these bugles, indigenous forces were able to confuse opposing troops, turning their own communication system against them. This clever tactic gave native warriors a strategic edge, showing how they used enemy technology to disrupt and outsmart their foes during battle. This ability to turn enemy tools against them didn't stop at communication. They also adapted quickly to new weapons and technologies brought by European settlers. Native American warriors have long been unfairly stereotyped as relying on solely traditional weapons like bows and arrows. But history tells a different story. When firearms appeared with European settlers, many tribes quickly adopted these new tools of war. Historian Mark Johnson in his 2020 study writes, many tribes quickly adopted firearms brought by European settlers and became expert marksmen with rifles and pistols. Johnson points out that these warriors often had more combat experience and a better understanding of firearms than the poorly trained U.S. soldiers they faced on the frontier. This skill gave them a serious edge in battles fought across tough and unfamiliar terrain. Beyond simply using firearms, Native forces also showed remarkable adaptability by repurposing captured enemy weapons and tactics. They learned to incorporate new technologies into their fighting styles while still using traditional methods where they were most effective. This flexible approach helped them keep pace with the rapidly changing warfare. A 2023 article in the American Historical Review explains that Native American adaptability isn't just a footnote in history, it's central to their military legacy. The article says, frontier combat required constant learning and evolution, showing how Native warriors kept changing their tactics and weapons to survive against enemies with more money and better guns. Far from being stuck in the past, Native fighters blended old and new technologies seamlessly. Their ability to learn quickly and innovate under pressure was a crucial factor in their prolonged resistance to colonization. Building on this adaptability, Native leaders like Chief Pontiac took it even further by combining traditional guerrilla tactics with disciplined, flexible formations on the battlefield. Chief Pontiac is one of the best-known Indigenous leaders to combine traditional guerrilla tactics with more formal, disciplined formations on the battlefield. His leadership during Pontiac's War showed how Native forces could adapt to modern American-style warfare while maintaining their own tactical strengths. Pontiac trained his warriors to fight in flexible formations, such as half-moons, circles, squares, and lines that could quickly shift shape depending on the terrain and enemy movements. This flexibility allowed his forces to take advantage of North America's often rugged and unpredictable landscapes. These formations proved highly effective, especially during the famous 1755 ambush against General Braddock's British forces. Pontiac's fighters, skilled in both guerrilla warfare and disciplined combat, were able to rout a much larger and more heavily armed European army. Their success shocked European commanders and forced them to reconsider their assumptions about indigenous fighting styles. Thompson's 2019 book on colonial warfare shows how European commanders had to change their approach to survive in North America. He writes, "Survival meant more than standing in rigid lines. It required adopting the mobility, flexibility, and deep knowledge of the land that Native warriors used so well." Chief Pontiac's leadership stands as proof of this shift. By mixing traditional guerrilla tactics with more disciplined formations, Native forces found ways to outsmart European armies and change how battles were fought on this new land.